All right, we have 6 people here. We have a couple more council members that have texted to say that they're close by and headed over. I'm going to go ahead and convene this. It's October 16th, 2018. This is the work session meeting. We're here in the Boards and Commission room down at City Hall. It is 9:14. When we have the government that works, the game plan we had talked about was doing that first, having no more than 60 minutes on it, a hard stop, no more than that. But we're missing some of the people, so I'm going to go ahead and call up the legislative briefing, and then we'll go into the government that works right after that for no more than 60 minutes, and then we'll get to the agenda. Probably will take 20 minutes. So, Bree, you want to introduce yourself for the record and then tell us what's up.
Good morning, everyone. Bree Franco, Intergovernmental Relations Officer for the City of Austin. I'm here before you today to provide an overview of the state legislative agenda that will be before you all on Thursday. Why are we here now? We're at least a month out from bill filing. So while session doesn't start till January 8th, bill filing will start on November 12th. And as you can see in this chart, that bottom line, last session of the 6,800 bills that were introduced and filed, over 2,500 of them were city-related. We've seen a marked increase over the last 10 years alone in that. The top line is hard to read. But it is 1997, there was 5,600 bills filed, and of that, 1,100 were city-related. So in 10 years, we've seen about a 1,400 bill increase, and then bills filed that affect cities, affect your authority and your ability, and even get into minutia as much as how many chickens are allowed to be in the backyard. As part of rolling out this agenda and as part of incorporating our community, because it extends not just beyond this council, but the citizens that you represent and the residents you represent, we at IGRO started providing legislative updates to boards and commissions that have many of your appointed members on that. And so this is a sampling of the boards and commissions we have presented to and some that we will still present to. I know they don't represent all the boards and commissions, but we did try to get a good sampling of the boards and commissions that do look at legislative matters, that do look at issues that are about current issues at the state capitol. And we found a very receptive response to those presentations, and that the members appreciated the information. They appreciated knowing what you guys were looking at, and asked how they themselves could help. So in terms of looking at your agenda, we'll start with the priority issues. The priority issues are those actually we're identifying as those issues that the Texas Legislature leadership and member interim charges have highlighted. So we're talking about the priorities set out by the governor, the lieutenant governor, and then later we'll find out with the new Speaker of the House what his priorities are, and then how also those priorities were articulated during the interim and committee hearings. So looking at the priority issues, I've called this, for all of you, every session, we're starting to call this your pyramid. And for this session, we anticipate the pyramid to look like this. It's very similar to last session's pyramid. Again, these wouldn't necessarily be the issues that I think you all would identify as the priorities if I asked for your priorities, but these are the issues that have been identified by the Texas Legislature as the priority issues that affect cities. And at the very top of that are Austin Energy, revenue caps will be back. Preemption has often been an issue of contention at the legislature, but we're now seeing a new concept called super preemption. And that's using statutory authority to be very broad to say even things like that a city can't do anything that affects a business interest. The bathroom bill will likely be back. We've heard that. We know short-term rentals from last session, and then also that in itself being a zoning and land use issue. And we're hearing that there will be a lot of bills about land use and zoning. Also, we know earned sick leave we've already had members say they're going to file that bill, and fair chance hiring, again, another local initiative that will likely be back in legislative form. So going to the two top priority issues being revenue caps and Austin Energy, just to give you all a quick recap, and I know you've seen this before, last session, during the regular session, the Senate filed a bill at 4%. It was voted out of Senate Finance at 5%. And then in the House, they filed the 4% bill, but ended up not passing a bill that affected the rollback rate. They just passed a bill that dealt with transparency, truth in taxation is what it was called. After that regular session, we were called back, if you all remember, for a special session, and that bill was listed as an item by the governor in the special session. And again, we saw the 4% cap, but only applying to large cities, not everybody. That's what came out of the Senate. And then out of the House passed a 6% cap that only applied to large cities again. When the House sent over the bill to the Senate, revised, the Senate appointed conferees, and the House didn't, and there was a signing die, and then there wasn't another special session called. But we know this issue will be coming back. In fact, the governor himself has weighed in on this issue. It's the first time that he has. He did this in January, and he released his property tax reform bicentennial blueprint. And in that blueprint, the details that we have are that it would be a 2.5% cap for all taxing jurisdictions, so cities, counties, special districts, school districts. That cap could only be exceeded for public safety and critical infrastructure. We don't know what that means yet. We don't know what all public safety includes, and we don't know what they consider critical infrastructure to be. But then, even if you're going to exceed that 2.5% cap for those two items, public safety and critical infrastructure, it would only be if a supermajority of this council approved that increase and a supermajority of the voters at an election approved that, which is a very new concept that I don't think exists in any other place in statute. So if we got the approval from council and the voters to exceed that cap for public safety and critical infrastructure, we could then go up to the statewide population growth and inflation, which in 2017 was about 4.4. So you'd have to start thinking about your budget in two buckets, your budget of 2.5 and then a potential 4.4 for other items. And keep in mind that vote wouldn't happen till November. That will also lead to issues, and when we do our budget, the city manager and our team would likely have to run two budgets in this scenario. Going back to the other priority issue, why it's been identified, there was Senate Business and Commerce had as their interim charge the following, and you all have seen this before, and that was about free market electricity, about examining government competitive intrusions. Basically, this is about getting close to deregulation of municipally owned utilities. So Austin Energy testified in that hearing in May, and we're waiting for that report to come out. But again, that's why this has also been put up right up there with revenue caps, is about protecting the authority of Austin Energy, which includes not only protecting the rate case you all signed on to and agreed to, but also the governing board, which right now is all of you. So on the agenda, we've also put in there, and this is just a highlight, I'd like to say that this agenda can always be amended by you all, even though we're adopting the core agenda today. You all can amend this agenda at any time, and throughout the interim, you have amended this agenda. And these are some of the resolutions that are now included in the draft put before you that you all have passed. And we could keep track of all of that and other resolutions that you all do take action on as guidance for the agenda. So moving to the lobby team, also before you on Thursday, I will be asking for authority to renew contracts for what we're calling our core lobby team. Again, to give you an idea of how do we make those selection, we look at a number of things for the lobby team, particularly their knowledge of municipal issues, If I'm having to explain issues too much to the lobby team, I might as well be down there myself, and don't, get me wrong, sometimes I am. But we also look at their conflicts. So they represent a number of clients, and the city has a number of interests that often affect some of their clients, and their experience and capacity. Also, we look at their current relationships and discuss with city departments how they feel the team has been effective. Again, this goes to how I examine the lobby team and look for making the strategic recommendation to you all on the lobby team. What I am recommending for the state team is to renew what I'm calling the core team that we kept during the interim. And that includes all the firms here you see on this page. We still have the speaker's race undetermined, so that won't be decided till the first day of session. And even after that, we'll have to wait to see who the speaker selects as his committee chairs, which will be very important. And based on those decisions, I will probably come back to you to either add to the team or at least let you know that I feel that with the current team, we have who we need. Also before you on Thursday is to renew the federal team, who is Capital Edge and Infra Strategies. The federal agenda, so you all know, I will try to bring forward to you for November 15th for consideration and adoption. And this is to provide to you just overall. I know that these expenses are something that we should be fiscally recognize and to know that the value of it. I started with this team in fiscal year 2016 and 17, and just showing you overall the costs that you provide for that the city pays for those teams. And I'm happy to answer any questions you all might have.
Sorry, did you have something with respect to the agenda? You're welcome.
On Thursday. This cold weather is getting to me. Right, on Tuesday, I will be offering some amendments to the legislative agenda. One is about the green line to add the wording in there that the Capital Metropolitan Regional Authority, is that it, Campo? CTRM. I was trying to remember. CTRM to the opportunity to facilitate the delivery of the green line, and the other one is to be able to use the ledger that is going to continue to grow to widen that, so it's not just with the Texas Facility Commission, but with all state agencies and all entities that we could use it to pay down something on. So those are the two. I've posted all of that on the message board and have not had any comments other than those are in support of. So
Yeah.
I've talked with John Michael about something that perhaps the University of Texas has a ledger, but I'm waiting to get feedback on that.
Yeah, I support both those, and I appreciate your leadership bringing them forward. And the way that you described it, we had originally thought you were focusing on government GSA, and it could be that they're the only ones, but to open it up for Breed to say, how can we make the best use of any and every ledger that exists out there, was just a concern. But I appreciate your bringing that forward. I support both of those, broadly stated. If you have language on those, and when you have language, if you could post them or get them out, that'd be helpful.
Don't we have language? That's what we posted.
Okay, there was specific language posted?
Uh-huh.
Then I'll take back a look at it. Thank you. Yes.
Good morning. So I wanted to let my colleagues know that I will be putting forward an amendment to help us to improve our procurement process. One of the reasons that we until now have not had a human capital management system is that we don't have an ability to use debt for cloud-based systems. And since the world is moving to cloud-based systems, we need to modernize our procurement methods and our debt financing. And I will post this to the message board, but it would be to support legislation to modernize procurement methods and debt financing for the purchase of cloud computing technology assets. So I'll be putting that forward as an amendment. And then I wanted to throw out an idea I have, which is not quite as baked as this one. I am concerned that we have a lot of surplus state land in the city, and that we do not have mechanisms that allow us to have longer-term conversations and more engagement from the city, the county, and other entities on the future of those sites as the state makes decisions about whether or not to sell that property. And so if colleagues are also concerned about this, I might be interested in putting something in there that would allow us to have some further conversations during this session, should there be bills related to the sale of property coming up that would allow us to have meaningful approaches to this land. This is something that we have done in the past with respect to Miller, that there was a much longer lead time before we were addressing those public lands, and I believe there was some state involvement in that, and I think that the results speak volumes of where we're able to end up as a city when we're able to go through a planning process and put the assets to good use. These other properties are not as large and are not the same thing as Mueller in any way, but I think it's a good example, at least of the planning part, whether it has to do with the state involvement or not, of where we can end up as a city if we're allowed to have the discussions over those lands which are in our city limits.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem.
I have a question about that, Councilmember Alter, and maybe this is one for our staff. I'm trying to remember which are the agencies that are required to offer state lands to the municipality prior to them going for private sale.
I don't.
That was the
Councilman,
situation with the Grove. I mean, it was required, they were required to offer it to us for sale. And so I want that to continue to be the.
That is the current state law, and so you want that to continue. I'm not sure if it's divided by agency or if it's just the state generally, but we'll be happy to look at that.
And so I think I'd be interested in talking with you about this maybe outside of the meeting
And again, I'm still trying to formulate the appropriate approach, and given that bills will be filed in a month, what we can accomplish. But even in the case of the Grove, we only had a very short window to be able to respond. And so if we can set up a system where we'd be able to have a better response, I think that would lead to better outcomes for both the city and the state of the future use of those lands.
And my hope would be that you would phrase it in a way that didn't point to a specific solution necessarily, but spoke about we just want to have a more meaningful opportunity and ability to be able to participate.
Yeah, my goal would be to have a more meaningful, and that could be varied, but
high level.
having a month to respond does not allow for that.
Right. And the language, as broad as it can be, at a really high level, gives Bree the greatest running room. And Ms. Houston, the language, I was just unclear. The resolved in the deal said that amend the state legislative agenda to support legislation that allows the city of Austin to use the value on its leisure with the Texas Facilities Commission with other state agencies and entities. And I didn't know if we had, so I read this to say we have like an accrued balance with the Texas Facility Commission, and we wanted to be able to apply it when we're dealing with other state agencies and entities. And I wanted to make sure that it was broad enough to also say, and if we have a balance with the University of Texas, we're actually able to realize the money. Because it appeared as if we had a ledger with a balance, or maybe had a ledger, but there was no vehicle for us to actually use it or get credit for it. It just seemed to be an accumulating balance sheet. So I think that, and outside of this meeting, I'll probably just suggest language that just makes it really broad, that says, let us get the value in as many different ways as we can with as many different ledgers as exist. That was the pin.
Right, and that's fine. I just ask, are there other ledgers that exist? Because I'm only aware of the one. So
Right.
that was my question.
Okay. Okay. Ann and then Greg.
Councilmember Alter, I had a question about the procurement one you mentioned. So you're talking in terms of changing the state law with regard to procurement, and I'm not certain how that is a barrier to us in terms of our IT acquisitions.
You can't float certain kinds of, I don't know if they're bonds or certificates of obligation for cloud computing because it's not a capital thing. It doesn't.
Oh,
have
okay. You're talking
it doesn't
about-
have a- It doesn't
Using
have a
debt.
capital element to it that you can use under the existing procurement and debt financing rules.
Okay,
So you can procure it, you just can't finance it through the debt, and so we just combine that in the way that.
Yeah.
So you are allowed to procure it if you have the money, but you can't finance it through traditional means that if it had been like a server and other things that you might have been able to do in the past.
Okay, I'd like to have some more conversation. We can talk about it offline.
Sure.
About whether or not that's something that we really want to pursue this session, so.
Okay.
Okay? Greg?
Mayor, could either Bree or Councilmember Houston remind me of what, and I remember that there is something in that has to get done at the legislature to enable the green line, but I don't remember what the barriers are. I don't know whichever one of the two of you wants to remind me of that, just so that I understand it.
You were on, you turned off. You're on.
As I remember correctly, in order for Capital Metro to move forward with the Green Line, they would have to have an election to be able to allow them to go outside of their service district into Elgin. They would have to have an election. There's another part of the code that allows the Capital Metropolitan, hold on just a minute. It's Capital Metropolitan Transportation Authority or other regional partners to be able to do that work with Capital Metro without having to have an election.
And so the idea being there would have to be, in the case of a green line that would go into Elgin, for example, 2 elections, 1 election to allow it, and then, but I'm just saying under current law, there'd have to be an election to allow it and an election to issue the debt to build it. Is that
Correct.
the question? Okay. Unlike if we were to run a train line up Guadalupe Lamar, it would just be 1 election instead of 2. Is that what we're?
I don't know.
I
if that-
actually don't know the answers to that, Councilmember.
I just want to.
And the only other thing is that the ability for another partner or one of the transit authorities to partner with Capital Metro does not require the election. It's my understanding.
Okay? Dan?
I'm not sure that it's a two-step process. I agree that there's an election required for Green Line, but I'm not sure if it's a two-step process. So in terms
I'm not
of
sure of that either.
election first and then funding after, I think you might can do it in 1 election, but we'd have to check that out. And we have to do, we may have to do election on the financing anyway. But anyway, that can be checked.
Mayor, okay, then I just wanted to best understand that because I'm very happy supporting us making the green line equal to other lines without deciding which lines we support or don't support, regardless. That's its own separate conversation. But if there is something that's an extra barrier for one of these lines, I'm happy to support getting rid of any extra barriers, and then we and Cap Metro, anybody else can take votes on lines. So I just wanted to understand that. The last thing I did want to, in case anybody watching this didn't watch the budget process, I also just wanted to restate what several of my colleagues stated on both potential changes to Austin Energy and to the revenue, so-called revenue caps bills that, I appreciate our lobby team working on that. I appreciate it being on our legislative agenda. If anything changed on the way we generate revenue at Austin Energy or revenue caps, it could potentially make our budget structurally unsound. I think it could come at a huge loss to the services the taxpayers receive, and I think that we'd have to reevaluate all parts of our budget, including some of the corporate incentive deals that have been inked in the past. I just think that if the situation changes and could impact the taxpayers, that might be one of the first places the council has to look to make changes. And I just want everybody who's watching this to know that.
Does our agenda has us defending against the cap at 2.5 or 4 or anything? Does our agenda also have us affirmatively pressing the issue about the fact that the state has increased our property taxes? The state's responsible for over 70% of the property tax increase that we feel in this area over the last 6 years.
Yes, it will in two places. One, I did have a page set aside to provide that information, using, in fact, the charts provided by your office, Mayor, and by Financial Services that show how much the school district portion for Austin taxpayers has increased by, I believe it's 280%. I know you know the numbers better than I do, versus the city portion of the tax. So we will be doing that in the agenda of making that case. Also, there will be a resolution that will be brought forward to you all, just like we did last session with our regional partners, meeting with Travis County, this AISD and the other school districts, Capital Metro, and Austin Community College. And in that resolution's in draft form right now, and we're all discussing to be presented to you all, it will have a strong support for the state funding of education as property tax relief.
It's good. You know, it used to be that it was the last 5 years that the schools, that the state's hidden property tax had gone up 288%. But now that Ed and the financial services people have rolled in now this year, we have 6 years worth of numbers, and it's over 360%. So it's going up an average of 60% a year, the state hidden property tax. Whereas the city's property tax in that same period of time has been going up about 4% a year. So we all know who it is that's causing the property tax problem here, and I hope that that's something that the legislature discusses and fixes. Ms. Houston.
Mayor, this is not on the agenda, but while we have just a minute, Councilmember Garza has introduced item number 39 that talks about federally qualified opportunity zones that I hope will pass on consent Thursday. But while she's here, could she explain to the public what that is?
You want Dave to explain? Is that something Delia would explain as opposed to Bree?
Well, Bree was the one that kind of brought it to us, so and I had not talked to Councilmember Garza, but I hope it passes, but I just think people out in the real world don't know what that is.
Do you want to say something about that while you're here?
I'm happy to, from what I remember, but federal opportunity zones is federal legislation that was passed that allows people and businesses that invest in those zones that were identified by the governor, and then they're being certified by the IRS to achieve capital tax gain savings from their investment and defer those capital tax gains if they invest in those areas. Other than that, there is not a lot of, at this time, prescriptive language about opportunity zones. And by that I mean, and this is what we've discussed with you all before, is that there is no municipal oversight of the zones. It's not like other state incentives or federal incentives that look for a public purpose and tie that back to a public entity.
Okay, thank you. Jimmy is running late. Will be here shortly, but he will also be posting 2 amendments to the legislative plan on the bulletin board, so people should look at those. I don't know what they are. Anything else to read before we let Bree go? Mayor Pro Tem?
And I'll look over this more carefully between now and Thursday, but I assume that we still have language in our legislative agenda that is rather broad in that it allows you to respond quickly if there are items coming before the legislature that are would be damaging to the city's financial position or otherwise.
Right. Yes.
Okay.
And to that point, Councilmember, the language is broad to provide that authority because we never know what the bills will be. We can't predict how the range that they'll be. But I also look at all the what our ordinances and current code is. I look at the resolutions passed by you all, and if there is an item that is unclear in that, I will come back to seek further authority from you all on those issues.
Thank you.
Okay, yes. Helen.
You know that we disagree on some of these issues, but I just wanted to say I think that you've done a really good job of reevaluating the legislative team and bringing down the amount of money total that we're spending on contract lobbyists. So
Thank you for that.
doing that.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Bree. Thank you.